Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the June 11th meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee for the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District. And the record shows that Director Wood and Director Monk are both here. And we'll call this meeting to order. We have a public opportunity to discuss matters of interest within the committee's scope. Any
There are no speakers this evening.
no takers? Okay, we'll go on with the consent agenda. Director Wood, do you have a motion on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I'll move the consent agenda, thank you.
Okay, and I'll second that. We can take a roll, but there's only two of us here, so.
Director Wood,
Aye.
Monk.
Okay,
Motion passes.
okay, presentation items. Thank you for waiting. We have a financial report through April 30th, 2015 with CFO Thomas. Welcome.
Directors, Chief Wells. I'm Amanda Thomas, Chief Financial Officer for the district. I'm here this evening to present the financial report for the 10 months ended April 30th, 2015. This presentation is supplemental to the report that you have in your packet. The first chart that I'll go over this evening presents the cash balance of the district as of April 30th. You can see that as of that date, the cash balance was approximately $48.7 million. And we're looking at the red line that represents the current fiscal year. You can see that cash balance is below where we've been historically when you compare to the prior years shown on the chart. And the reasons for that are primarily related to the payout of the FLSA settlement of $4.8 million, as well as the IGT transfer of $10.5 million. So that brought down the cash balance, and that's what you're seeing here on the chart. The next chart shows general operating fund reserves. This generally tracks with the cash balance, but I did want to point out a difference here. Again, we're looking at the red line, which represents the current fiscal year, and that reflects both the IGT transfer amount as well as the revenues. So even though we hadn't received the cash by April 30th, we've accrued those revenues, and so that's reflected in the general fund operating reserves. The other thing that I wanted to point out on this chart is that we're showing a dashed line of the $15.9 million, which represents where we expect the reserves to be as of the end of the fiscal year. That amount has actually been adjusted from prior versions of this report. We have budgeted this year $1.2 million related to the FLSA settlement. That $1.2 million was actually recognized as expense last fiscal year and had already been taken out of the starting reserve balance. So to not double count that, we've adjusted the ending reserve. So we're now showing a $15.9 million amount. That amount previously was $14.7 million. I also wanted to mention that $15.9 million is really a projection based on budget. As we walk through the balance of this report, you'll see that we have year-to-date revenues and expenditures that are tracking not quite at budget, and we expect that to, at the end of the year, translate into an additional amount that would go into reserves beyond the $15.9 million that's shown. This chart shows the medic cost recovery revenue through April 30th. You can see that the actual revenue received was about $26.2 million. I want to point out that this revenue is just the ambulance billing, so it excludes the GEMT and the IGT. And as you can see from this chart where we're showing, again, the red line being actual year-to-date, and then the blue line being the budget, that we are trending below budget in this revenue item. Although our call volume is up, we're seeing a lower revenue per call. We really think that that's related to some shifts in payer mix. We're seeing a higher proportion of the calls covered by Medi-Cal, which is the lowest reimbursement rate. So that's really translating into revenues trending below budget for that line item. The next chart shows total revenues for the general fund. You can see, again, looking at the red line, through April 30th, total revenues were approximately $172.5 million. Again, you'll notice that this is trending slightly below budget overall. That's in part because of what we just talked about on the medic cost recovery, but we're also seeing property taxes coming in below where we would expect them to be at this point in the year. We had a total budget for property taxes of $120 million. We've received approximately $117 million of that. We know that there's some amount that will be yet received through the end of the year, but we don't expect it to be enough to make up that entire difference. So we do think that because of those two items, the medic cost recovery and property taxes, that we will likely come in somewhere below budget in total revenues. Shifting gears a little bit to expenditures, this chart shows salaries and benefits expenses for the district. Obviously, salaries and benefits represent the largest component of operating expenses. And then through April 30th, total salaries and benefits expenses were $115.7 million. Again, looking at that red line compared to the blue line, you can see that this item as well is tracking below budget. A part of the reason for that is that $1.2 million that was budgeted for the FLSA settlement that, as I explained earlier, won't actually be an expense of this year because it was recognized last year. So that accounts for part of the difference. But we are also tracking below budget in our constant staffing overtime costs. So that's contributing to overall salaries and benefits expenses showing below budget. This chart shows total expenditures, and again, because salaries and benefits represent such a large proportion of total expenditures, it generally tracks along with what we see on salaries and benefits. So far through April 30th, total expenditures are $143.8 million. You can see that's trending below the blue budget line. And I think overall what we're seeing here, when we compare what we see with expenditures to what we see with revenues, overall expenditures are trending below budget more so than revenues are, and we really do expect that to translate into a net contribution to reserves at the end of the year. And then the final slide this evening shows the balance in the OPEB trust fund. So as of April 30th, the balance in that fund was approximately $12.8 million, and that's made up of $11.7 million in contributions that have been made, as well as $1.1 million in earnings on the amounts in deposit on that fund. We are making contributions of about $440,000 a month that reflects the full funding of the ARC, and we expect by June 30th that the balance in the fund would be $13.7 million. That concludes my presentation this evening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Quick question. Sure. Excellent, appreciate the detail. And I might be getting ahead of things, but your comment about property taxes trending lower than budget, is that reflected in our preliminary budget that we'll talk about later? Has there been any change in the preliminary budget due to that information, or?
There has not been any change in the preliminary budget due to that information. We do think a portion of what's contributing to that are refunds. We know that there was a refund related to Aerojet that had about a $300,000 impact, and some of that you see a larger impact in the first year of the appeal and a smaller impact on an ongoing basis. So there are reasons to expect there may have been a larger impact this year than we would see ongoing, but we're still digging into that a little bit to understand where we might end up this year and why, and we'll be able to use that information at final budget to make any adjustments if necessary.
Thank you.
Details.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our agenda. Chief, do you have anything else on our end?
Thank you, Amanda. A nice presentation, and that's actual. And we'll be talking later this evening about the preliminary budget.
Okay. I don't have a date on the next meeting.
Give me a moment. To be determined.
Yeah.
Just as a general talking point for an awareness level, I guess, we would like to just impose it here while we have a moment, talk at another date and time about scheduling this meeting instead of the first meeting in a month being the second meeting in a month, in that then you could see the proposed budgets at the Finance Committee prior to the first meeting of the month where we're going to approve them, or see them as a full board, not necessarily approve them. So a little discussion on that. We can have a little more offline, but just anticipate as we move forward in the schedule of the calendar year, if that's,
Just swapping the policy and,
yeah, that way, just as an example, hypothetically, if you were going into final budget this year, you could talk about it at the Finance Committee prior to going to the full board, and people could have a little bit of time to think about it before we make a vote.
That makes eminent sense.
put that on the full board agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. There being nothing more, Director Wood, if you have any items that you want to have looked at or brought up from finance, let us know so we can get it on agenda. I have in mind looking at specific programs, the helicopter program and some other things just for discussion and look at it, just we're doing our fiduciary responsibility in the future. But other than that, if there's anything specific that you have, we can certainly put it on the agenda to look at.
Thank you.
Okay. That being completed, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.